Because this is a message that Congress has to hear and has to hear often. You can be a hero by cutting the research budget this year, and the economic damage that does, doesn't play out in the next election, but it plays out in the decades to come. It's almost a design failing of democracy, that all of the political incentives are near term, and that causes us to systematically underinvest in things with long-term payoffs, like federally funded research. And so making sure that everyone who works in these buildings here understands that those investments pay off not only 20 years from now, but will pay off in the sort of startup operations you're hearing about today.
We believe, Chris and I understand that the value of science in keeping America a competitive place in a global economy is at the forefront. And we want to make sure that we do everything that enhances the chances that science is honored and esteemed. I also would say, perhaps as an aside, that in my view, science gives the opportunity for policymakers like me to have better answers to difficult questions. So not only is this beneficial to our economy, but it's beneficial to our understanding of the world, so that decisions that we make have more value and have greater consequence, better consequence to the citizens we represent.
Thank you, Jerry, for being a good partner in the Competitiveness Caucus, something that we launched because we saw there was not one area to focus on all the different components of competitiveness globally, to look at tax, trade, intellectual property, innovation, immigration, other policy areas that if we don't get them right, we can reasonably predict that the United States will not be as secure and prosperous and promising a country as it's been. And federal investment in R&D is an absolutely linchpin piece of our being a competitive society going forward.
When I joined the university community, I had no idea the depth and breadth of the science that was happening at most universities, covering essentially all topics of inquiry. And what was particularly surprising to me was how commercially relevant so many of these inventions are. And a surprising number of those turn into products that are heading towards the market that will either save or improve people's lives. There were nearly 1,000 new startups created last year based on research emerging from the American universities, according to Autumn. But it's easy to hear those numbers and not necessarily have them have context. Because each one of those companies, if they succeed, will be something that you will all and your children and your children's children will be using in everyday life, and sometimes may actually save their lives.
And I'm here representing HylaPharm. We are a company that originated from the University of Kansas in Lawrence. And our company is developing new approaches to cancer therapeutics. And what's different about our approach is that most cancer drugs are delivered systemically, which then, of course, all of the organs and all of the whole system receives the same toxic dose that you would rather have just go to the tumor. The reason you cannot just inject directly into the tumor is you have a very bad reaction at the tumor site if you try and do that. That can be fatal. What we have done, or the scientists at KU have done, is develop a methodology so that we can now inject some cancer drugs directly into the tumor and therefore get higher concentrations of the cancer drug at the tumor, and also then greatly reduce the systemic side effects. NIH paid for the original research in developing this approach, and along the way we've also gotten, the lab has gotten funding from the Department of Defense. And more recently, the company itself, since it's been founded, has received several SBIR grants from the NCI. We're still fairly young. I think, as has been mentioned in biopharma, the path line, the timeline is can be a little longer and more challenging. We currently have, I think, about 8 employees, and I'm hoping we're actually hiring recently and hopefully expanding and getting closer into our clinical trials soon.